Hello everyone and welcome to another video. We are back for another episode of the Fragrance League, and this one is a very interesting episode. First off, I gotta say it's only 2 episodes in and they've already kind of broken my competition. I'll explain how when we actually get to it, but it'll become clear in a bit. So I'm gonna have to revise the rules. The rules are actually in a separate video for if you're curious, but the basic rundown is I send out 5 samples to different reviewers, and they compete basically to guess whether or not the fragrance is expensive or cheap, or if the fragrance is a niche fragrance or a designer fragrance. So they're giving their opinions on it, and we're basically coming up with a scoring system, or coming up with the scores for it. Again, a more in-depth explanation in the actual video. That's what the purpose of the video is for. So the 3 reviewers that we have competing today are Moody or Brenda, Frunkinator, or Frunk, and Dgreg. So those are 3 reviewers who are competing against each other today and racking up points. So with that, let's start with the very first fragrance. The very first fragrance is a fragrance called Gold from the house of Dgreg. Now this fragrance is a niche fragrance, and it's an inexpensive niche fragrance. So that's a little bit of a twist to it. It's an inexpensive niche fragrance. I consider, sorry, but you can check the rules, but inexpensive is anything under, I think it was $90 or $95 for a 50 milliliter and under. All right, so let's see what the reviewers thought of Dgreg Gold.
Hey everyone, it's me, Moody Boo, and thanks to Dgreg for including me in on this mystery sample sniffing. Snample siffing? I don't know what that is, but I don't think that's what I did. So he gave us 5 samples. Y'all know, I'm sure this is all going to be explained 1,000 times. And we're supposed to figure out if they're niche, designer, expensive, or inexpensive. And so I would show you, sorry, coffee's brewing in the background. I would show you the samples, but the numbers fell off of them, and so I wasn't sure if I got the right sample back on the right one. So I had to go by first impressions only. I couldn't really redo it again. So I'm just going to quickly go through these. Number 1 was really light, but it didn't have that kind of designer-ish kind of smell to me, even though I don't believe in really designer versus niche versus expensive versus inexpensive. Some of my favorite perfumes are less than 20 bucks a bottle, and some of them are over 200. So I thought the first one was a cheap niche. And I hope I'm doing this right. I don't know. Maybe not. Anyway, I felt like it was not a cheap niche, an inexpensive niche.
Everybody? So a really big thank you to Cody for allowing me to participate in the Fragrance League. I've got my coffee here, but since it's 2015, I'm using a K-cup. I'm not using you know, the raw beans anymore. So technology, right? So let's get started without further ado. Get this ball rolling. I have all of these samples laid out from 1 to 5 underneath me, so I'm going to spray and then I'm going to pick it up and give my impressions. You guys know the rules. I have to say whether or not it's designer or whether or not it is niche, and if it's either cheap or expensive. All right, so number 1. Kind of zesty. Lemony, smells kind of cheap. Not really a fan. Smells something more in the 80s almost. No, you know what? It's very fine lemon. I'm going to say that this is niche, and I'm going to say that it is expensive.
What's up, YouTube?
Right?
This is Dgreg. Be sure to visit my channel, D's Common Sense. All right, number 1. The juice is, I'm not going to try to be focusing, just trust me, it's number 1. Juice looks a little amber in color. It smells kind of weird. Well, let's see. Something on it. Oh, crap. Got it on my hand. All right. Okay. This smells like nothing that I've ever come across before in a fragrance ever. And it's not saying much. I mean, it's not like I've been doing this for years and years. But good Lord, I do not like this. All right. This is very different. And from that fact alone, I'm going to say niche. And not only is it niche, I'm going to say that it's going to be expensive, only because most niche are. All right.
So starting off, Brenda is in the lead. She gets both of them right, guesses correctly that it's a niche fragrance and that it's inexpensive. Meanwhile, Frunk, he guessed that it was a niche fragrance, but he guessed that it was an expensive niche, so he's wrong. Same thing with Dgreg, same thing. So at the point total at the end of the first round is right up here on the scoreboard. You've got Brenda in front with 2 points total with a +1 advantage. Meanwhile, Frunk and Dgreg are right behind her with 1 respective each. So let's move on to the next fragrance. The next fragrance is, the next fragrance that I gave them was Burberry Classic. This is an older fragrance, it's a designer fragrance, it's an inexpensive designer fragrance. So with that, let's see what they thought about it.
Number 2, I felt was an inexpensive designer. It just had that kind of air to it, like it was a designer fragrance. It's hard to really quantify, but it's almost, designer perfumes can have really similar characteristics to one another, in my opinion. Niche, that's why I lean more towards niche, is because I feel like niche in India and Middle Eastern are much more unique than a lot of the designers. A lot of the designer perfumes smell very similar to me, but whatever.
This smells very familiar. Very common smelling, very easygoing. I like it better than the first one. I'm getting kind of a synthetic-y vibe though. I'm gonna say designer.
Now
Expensive.
for number 2, I'm gonna find a sample. Number 2, the juice in here is kind of clear. Got like a little color to it, not much at all. All right, I'm gonna spray this puppy. All right, this is more easier to get along with. I actually probably wear this. This is a mature scent. Generic, but nice generic. I mean, I like the fact this would be a good work scent for me. Nothing daring. So I'm gonna say designer and inexpensive. But what this smells like a Allure Homme type, the just original Allure Homme, or same family of Dolce & Gabbana Pour Homme. This is that type of scent. I'm not sure which it is because I don't need one of those. So I smelled them before, but I don't own any. So number 2 is designer and expensive.
All right, and again, Brenda gets it right again. She correctly guesses that it's a designer fragrance and that it's an inexpensive designer fragrance. So she gets another +2 overall points from it. Meanwhile, Frunk, on the other hand, this time did the same thing. He guessed that it was a designer fragrance, but he guessed that it was an expensive designer fragrance. So he gets half of it right that time. Dgreg, on the other hand, got both of them right as well too. So he gets 2 points on down to that. So our totals are up here, as you can see right there. We've got Brenda in the lead with 4 points and a +1.5 or a +1.5 advantage. You've got Frunk, who's at 2 points and no advantage, and you've got Dgreg, who is at 3 points with a 0.5 advantage. All right. So with that, next fragrance up. The next fragrance that I gave them, the fragrance number 3. Fragrance number 3 is actually Ambre Nuit. Now this is an expensive niche fragrance. After doing all the calculations, it comes out to that. This is also the fragrance that technically broke the competition. And the reason being is because of what you're actually going to see in the actual video series. So I'm going to actually let you watch their responses first and see if you can actually catch on to what actually broke the competition.
Number 3 I felt was an expensive niche. It just, again, had that air to it, that smell to it, like it was more niche-y, more unique, not as mainstream, and it smelled like it had some quality to it. So,
Number 3. And I'm really not putting a lot of thought into these. I'm just kind of going with what my nose tells me. This one is a little bit deeper. I get some patchouli. I get some, I want to say almost like coffee beans. I like this one. I'm going to say designer. Expensive.
All right, let's try number 3. Get a little spray strip here. Now this one, kind of clear as well, a little tint. Got that one good. Whoa. Oh yeah, I know this one. I have this one, and this is very distinct. I'm gonna let you know right now. This has got to be Christian Dior's Ambre Nuit. Oh, I like that smell. Very distinct, man. I don't think too many things smell like this. All right, number 3, designer, expensive.
So I'm not sure if you actually caught what actually happened there, but let me explain what actually happened there. So again, this was Ambre Nuit, and this was a niche, expensive fragrance, or a fragrance that I had dubbed niche and expensive. So Brenda got it right off the bat. She guessed that it was a niche and expensive fragrance. She got both right. Frunk, on the other hand, he guessed that it was a designer fragrance, and then he guessed that it was an expensive designer fragrance. So he got half of it right. But then we moved on to Dgreg. Dgreg actually correctly guessed what the fragrance actually was. So he guessed that he was smelling Ambre Nuit, which was correct. But then he says that it's a designer, an expensive designer fragrance. And then I thought about it and I realized, well, yeah, he's actually kind of right. I guess you could kind of consider Ambre Nuit a designer fragrance rather than a niche fragrance. I was thinking of it more along the lines of their private line, and so that it was kind of more of a niche line, but it is a designer house. So then I kind of got to thinking, well, if that's the case, how am I going to mark Frunkinator wrong? So that's why I kind of thinking I'm not liking this niche designer bit, and I may actually remove that from the competition. It's in there for this video, but I may actually change it up and revise it to remove that from the competition. Either way, let me know what your thoughts are on the whole matter. I'm really curious to the whole thing. But either way, Dgreg got bonus points, and actually I wanted to actually possibly swap it out for guessing the actual fragrance like Dgreg just did in this, and you're going to see some other people do some guessing in this as well too. So, but in any case, Dgreg got him right too. And the scoreboard is, as you can see on the top, right here, we've got Brenda in the lead, still at 6. She's got a +2 advantage. Meanwhile, Frunk is at 3, and Dgreg is at 5 with a +1 advantage. All right? So with that, let's move on to the next fragrance. The next fragrance is from the house of Prada. It's Prada Amber Pour Homme. Now, this fragrance is a designer fragrance, and it's an inexpensive designer fragrance. So with that, let's see what they thought.
Number 4 was the hardest for me to figure out, but I put expensive designer. I felt like, I still have it on my hand. It was one of the few that the numbers didn't fall off of, but it just has this, I don't know, I was really torn though, because it's a very soapy kind of a perfume, in my opinion, and that can go either way. Either it can be designer or niche. So I put expensive designer for that one.
4? I wonder if these would smell different by applying them to the skin. I'm not a fan of this at all. It's not. This reminds me of designer. I get almost like a licorice-y vibe. It kind of trying to pick notes out quickly is not easy. Especially with the alcohol on the top. Designer. Inexpensive.
Okay, number 4. Ooh. It's got like a little purplish color to it. Okay. Number 4 is Whoa. Alright, that's not whoa like a bad thing. Now this is a clean scent here, man. What is this thing? Well, first of all, let me go with designer, inexpensive, only because it's just soapy scent. But it's done very well. Holy cow. Maybe it's niche. So I'm gonna guess that this is designer, inexpensive, and I'm gonna say Prada Amber Pour. Oh yeah, I need to get a bottle of this. If it's Prada Amber Pour, I'm sure Cody is gonna tell us at the end.
Alright, so Brenda finally got one wrong. So she guessed that it was a designer fragrance, but she guessed that it was an expensive designer fragrance. So unfortunately, she got this one half right. So she got 1 point for it. Meanwhile, Frunk, on the other hand, got both of them right and did some catching up in this round. And meanwhile, Dgreg just did outstanding. He guessed the fragrance correctly what it was, and then consequently guessed both items right. So at the end of this round, the 4th round, we've got a tie, but well, not a tie, but we've got Brenda with 7 points and a +2 differential. We've got Frunk with 5 points and a plus 0.5 differential, and we've got Dgreg with 7 points and a +0.5 differential. All right, so going into the last round, it's still technically anyone's game, and we'll see what they thought. The last fragrance, I decided to go see if I could throw any curveballs, actually. I chose Millésime Imperial for the last fragrance, just because there are a couple fragrances that supposedly smell like Millésime Imperial. You've got your Love and Luxe, you've got your Sean Johns, you've got your, you know, you've got a lot of MI clones basically floating out there, and I wanted to see if they would get, you know, if they could pick up on it or get it right or wrong. We'll see what they thought.
And the very last one reminded me of a Creed or an Al Rehab, and that's quite a span because one's very expensive niche and the other one is inexpensive. But it reminded me of Silver by Al Rehab, but it also had this Creed air to it, you know, like a Green Irish Tweed or Millésime Imperial, one of those kind of, not saying that's what it was, but kind of had that air to it. So I put number 1 light, or a inexpensive niche. Number 2 is a inexpensive designer. Number 3 is an expensive niche. Number 4 is expensive designer. And number 5, I had both. It's niche, and it could be expensive or it could be inexpensive. It just depends. I really couldn't tell either way. But But if I had to guess, I would go with inexpensive. Inexpensive niche for number 5. All right, that's it for me, and I can't wait to see the results. All right, y'all have a good day. Peace.
At least number 5. Sorry. This. Creed, Millseam Imperial, niche, expensive. No doubt. Or are you playing a trick on me? And this is actually... No, I'm going Creed with that one. Number 4 again. 3. That's it, guys. I'm not changing my answers. I'm sticking with what my gut told me, and on my first sniff. So it wasn't like I went and tried these multiple times. Thanks again to Cody. Hope I did all right compared to the other noses out there.
Number 5.
Later.
When you spray a lot, and you get that alcohol in it, it comes off like a Creed fragrance, but I can't distinguish whether it's Silver Mountain Water or Himalayan or MI, Millseam Imperial. And maybe because it's the alcohol, I'm going to have to give this one a little bit more. Maybe because there's alcohol on it, but it has like a little Creed DNA. It leans more towards Millseam Imperial. So this could very well be multi-platinum, but I'm going to guess that there's not a designer that can get this close, because if I can smell it and say, hey, this smells like Millseam Imperial, it's got to be Creed Millseam Imperial. So this must be a newer batch, a new fresher juice. I'm going to say niche, and you already know it's expensive. Creed Millseam Imperial. Thank you for letting me participate in this little game competition. Good luck to everyone else. Dgreg 846 signing out.
And the last fragrance was the determinant in this one. Brenda just barely missed winning it. It literally came down to the last second. She got it half right. She guessed that it was a niche fragrance, but she guessed that it was an inexpensive fragrance. So she just barely missed it, and she changed her answer at the last second. Even though, you know, she was on the right track, she technically guessed the fragrance too. She guessed that it was Millseam Imperial, and she was kind of deciding between that and Al Rehab fragrance, and she just changed it at the last second and said that it was a inexpensive fragrance. So unfortunately, she doesn't win it, but she ends strong with 8 points. She just missed 2 parts of it wrong, and a +2 differential. That's just outstanding, actually. Frunk brings up the rear, but he did really well as well too, and he correctly guessed the fragrance outright. As you can see, he wasn't fooled for a second. He was like, instantly, this is Millseam Imperial. Bam, got it, done, end of story. Anyways, he ends with he ends with 7 points and a +1 differential. So just right behind, tailing up. And our winner of the competition is Dgreg, who once again guessed the fragrance and was able to tell instantly that it was Millseam Imperial. So all 3 of them were instantly able to tell that it was Millseam Imperial and a Creed. And I gotta tell you, that's really saying a lot for Creed. It's, you know, a lot of people say that, I guess you'd say that, you know, you won't be able to tell the difference. Well, so far, reviewers have been able to tell the difference when Creeds are presented to them, which to me is just outstanding. I think it's a testimony to the quality that you're kind of getting. But either way, Dgreg wins this round of Fragrance League and with 9 points and a +2 differential.